Send it to me real quick.
Okay.
Because I'm gonna have to, when it gets, sorry, this craziness happened.
I should be able to.
Okay, so if you, do you want to?
I just added the cottage food notice, you know, and
Okay, well, it will be in the slide slides that I send. But if you want that specific slide, let me go and download.
yeah, well, people could print it off, I guess, and use it.
Yeah, we will send the entire slide set to everyone.
All right. Well, that's frustrating.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Yeah, because it's open, right? It's open on my screen, right? And then I should be able to hit share the screen. But the only thing that comes up is your face again. I mean, like in a box.
I think we have plenty of workarounds, so we'll just go ahead with sharing your screen. It is not a big deal at all. Happens more than you might think, actually.
Yes.
All right. That way I'll be able to see people.
Yep.
Okay. Well, I'm going to go ahead and get my screen organized. Thanks for bearing with us on the technical issues, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started today. I'm Colette DePhelps. I am an area educator with University of Idaho Extension. My home base is in Coeur d'Alene. I serve North Idaho, so the 10 northern counties, and my office is actually on the Moscow campus. Today, I am joining you from rainy McCall, Idaho, where we've had some other meetings the last couple of days. So I apologize for any technical glitches that we're experiencing as we're operating outside of our usual environments. Today's topic is going to be food safety and licensing requirements in Idaho. I'm really excited to be able to have our presentation this morning by Nancy Becker. Nancy is a senior environmental health specialist with Idaho Public Health District 2, which is in north central Idaho. Nancy has been working in this area for many years. She is an excellent resource, and we're really excited to have her and appreciative of her time. A couple of webinar tips. One is if you can make sure that you're muted except for the Q&A sessions, that is going to be extremely helpful as we'll have a lot of people in today's webinar. If you're experiencing any technical issues, just please make sure your computer is plugged in so you have power. And then if you could close all the other programs running on your computer, it's going to allow you to dedicate your bandwidth to this webinar. If there are technical issues that you're experiencing on your side, you can always type into the chat at the bottom of the screen, and Mackenzie Lawrence, who is one of our team members, is going to be standing by to help with technical issues. If you're having problems with your sound, you can switch to the phone, watch the video on your computer, and then listen on your phone. That call-in number was provided in your welcome email. If you do switch, please mute your computer sound because otherwise you're going to get feedback. We will have handouts of the slides from today's presentation, in addition to a couple of other handouts that Nancy has provided on acidified foods and HACCP, which she's going to be talking about today. So here's today's topics. Nancy's going to be talking about food safety and licensing requirements, and then we're going to watch a short video on temporary food establishment safety. And then I'm going to give a short presentation about the Food Safety Modernization Act, and in particular, one rule of that act that applies to specialty food businesses. And then I'll share some additional food safety resources that you can explore on your own time. So with that, I am going to go ahead and stop my share and then reshare my screen with Nancy's presentation. So Nancy, while I'm getting that up, perhaps you could just go ahead and introduce yourself.
And Nancy, you are muted, just so you know.
Thank you for that. The little red buttons, they just pop up all over the place. At least it's not a buzzer, right?
Right.
So I've been, like Colette said, I've been around for a long time, and I was kind of excited whenever she called and asked me to present again, because I was trying to figure out how many years it's been since we did a presentation. I think it's well before like 2015, maybe even before then. So a lot of the information will be similar, because really the food safety hasn't really changed. You know, it's still important not to touch food with your hands and that type of thing. But so today I was just hoping to give you kind of a broad overview of you know, how to bring your ideas to fruition, and maybe take some of the steps out from actually, you know, coming into the office and, you know, I send you away with some homework or, you know, hate, you know, or squash your idea, you know, like fermented soybeans or something like that. So anyway, so just it'll be a lot of information, a lot of food for thought. And I would like to get an idea of what the audience wants to actually, you know, like where most of the audience wants to go with their ideas in bringing a food to the public.
So that's a great opportunity for folks to go ahead and write in the chat, and we can take a look at that at our first break, Nancy.
Perfect.
Before we go on, Nancy, I just want to jump in again and let you know that your video is not on. And I didn't know if you wanted it to be on so we can see your face. Oh, there we go.
There we go. So now you can see my face.
Yes, we can.
All right. Well, we always like to start with a nice title page, so we can just go ahead and move on to the next one. But so our objective today is to kind of review who is regulated and who is exempt, and specifically we'll go through a little bit of food safety. We're not going to get down in the weeds with you know, facility layouts or any of that thing like that. And then we'll break out the different types of food establishments, mainly concentrating on cottage food and not so much the temporaries, but then with the wholesale processor end of things is kind of the focus of today. So just a little note of why food safety is important. We do have many people that do get sick, and a lot of them don't report that they're sick, because a 24-hour flu is mostly gastrointestinal, probably something they ate didn't sit quite well with them. But all of these things are preventable with proper food safety. So that's why we have rules, and pretty much a rule is made because someone at some point, you know, got sick or possibly died from the situation. So that's why we have rules, and the overseeing of those rules come from the Idaho Health and Welfare, and then with a memorandum of understanding, the local public health department like apply those rules to the local communities. So just some background on pretty much, depending on how old you are, as people are starting to forget about the Jack in the Box experience that we had out here in the Northwest, where we had lots of people got sick just from the simple action of not cooking a hamburger to 155. And we're talking about 5-6 seconds of leaving that burger on the grill between being sick and not being sick. So, and E. coli, salmonella, we're getting more and more of those fixed. You know, like we don't have as many outbreaks in that, but Listeria is kind of in our forefront just because of its nature of being able to grow in a refrigeration, and it's in all types of foods. The other thing is it doesn't take too many bacteria cells to make a person ill. So as compared to salmonella, where you might need 20 cells, Listeria, you only need like 4. So next slide. So I just want to kind of get an idea of things that you can do when you want to do a food business. When you come into the health department and you sit down with the inspector, they're going to ask you these type of questions. So do you want to do cottage food? Do you want to open a restaurant? Do you want to, what needs license? What not need licensed? Do you want to wholesale? You want to sell on the internet? So we'll ask you a lot of questions about your food establishment. So just kind of get an idea of, if you can help me out with this, I kind of like to see where the audience's interest lies. Do they have a business? Are they want to start one?
So we have a person who has a chocolate business, Sweet Leashes in Eagle, Idaho, and she has done the Serve Safe class online.
Oh.
We have another participant that's wanting to sell beef, lamb, and chicken and interested in selling meat rubs and fresh herbs to accompany people's meat choices. And we also have somebody that is interested in heritage and wild crafted foods, things like elderberry syrups, fire cider, herbal teas, unusual jellies and jams such as beer and rosehip, infused vinegars and oils, tinctures and herbs, also meat. And then another person who is interested in adding canned goods like tomatoes, pickles, juices to their farm community supported agriculture or CSA direct sales to members. So we have a pretty wide range of folks out there.
A little bit of everything. So we'll try to touch all those things today. Next slide. So first of all, we're going to go through the cottage food operations. A cottage food is something that you can make in your home. However, it does need to be shelf stable. We have websites. Our public health website does have all the documents like fact sheets for the different types of cottage foods. There's an example there on your screen, you know, fruit pies, cakes without, you know, the cream cheese filling, pastries again without cream fillings, you know, candy, dry seasoning, mixes. That's what you can dry herbs under this. You can't dry vegetables, but you can dry herbs and still be a cottage food. And then popcorn balls or just plain popcorn. There's pretty much lots of foods that are available that meet the cottage food criteria. And just a little background on the cottage food. In Idaho, they deregulated low-risk foods probably in the early 90s. But we didn't call them low risk foods at the time. We actually look at the food that you wanted to make and assess the risk of that food if it would support bacteria growth. In 2015, they just changed that, right? The definition from low risk, and they now attach that cottage food label to it. So, we've been a long time in Idaho being able to sell low risk or cottage food. So those two words are interchangeable. You can't sell a cottage food wholesale, which means not to the end user. It has to be to the end user. Doesn't matter what the risk is when you go wholesale, you have to be regulated. Next slide. I did it. This is just a copy of the cottage food assessment form. So you would fill this out and you put what you're doing there, and then you submit it to the health department, whoever's local in your region, because we do have 5 offices, and that inspector would review that and then sign off on whether it's low risk or not. This also does have, if you do fundraisers too, I mean, the form is the same for, and you can do potentially hazardous food on this form too, but today we were just going to focus on the cottage food aspect of this approval form. A lot of the farmers market require you to fill this out before you get in there. I review about 120 low risk assessments a year. I do line item vetoes, so sometimes there's an item in there and I'll just cross it out and say you can't do that. So we try to make it pretty easy for approval on the cottage food forms. I have found this summer to have a couple foods at market that weren't on the approved list and had vegetables in it, like jalapeno bread or like cheese on the bread. So so just remember that the health inspector, goes into the farmer's market too and likes to eat. So thank you. Next slide. So there are any questions on the cottage food aspect before we go into regulated food?
So can we ask questions right now?
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so my question is, I was getting ready to type it in. I'm under cottage food right now. If I freeze dry a huckleberry and there's no moisture in it, can that go in some white chocolate and be sold as a low risk?
Oh, I know that freeze-dried food was under the previous person that was considered, freeze-drying was considered hazardous, but since it's a fruit, I probably would have to look into that.
Okay.
But just off the top of my head, I know that freeze-drying foods has come up as needing to be regulated. So you may need to just freeze-dry all your berries under licensure, and then after you freeze-dry them, they would be low risk, and then you could make them into your. So if you rented, say, a kitchen for a day and freeze-dry a bunch of them, then you could use them throughout the year.
Well, I'm actually going, is that what you consider regulated when I go in to get my license to be able to go wholesale or retail?
Yeah, you would need that. Okay. Yes. Yeah, so that same license would cover all that.
Okay. Yeah, because I work with Amber and Karen out of the office, and I'm actually just signed up for a kitchen today. So.
Oh, okay.
I'm in the process of switching over. But I did have a question.
So if you need a permit, then that would all be covered under that permit.
Okay, perfect. Great,
so,
thank you.
And it would be your end product would be a low risk food. It's just getting it there.
Right,
But
because once I
you just-
freeze dry it, it no longer has the capability of getting.
Supporting bacteria growth
Right.
or molding
Right.
or
Okay, cool.
would be more the concern.
Alrighty, awesome. Thank you so much.
Great. We have another question. Monica's asking, how about meringue powder in royal icing on sugar cookies?
Oh boy. I don't have a problem with that. And I would probably, if it came through my office, I would go ahead and approve that because there's so much sugar in there. If we really wanted, I don't think I've ever had a recipe tested to see what the final pH and the water activity would be on that, but the water activity should be pretty low. And if she could submit a sample of that icing to the tech lab, and it's like $15. And definitely if it came back below 4.6, it would definitely be a low risk product.
Would you recommend that verification?
We almost have to now with so that we can have uniformity across the state. But I'm almost pretty sure that it would turn out to be a low risk. It would, if it's below 4.6, I think, it would be approved because it wouldn't support bacteria growth. There's so much sugar in that I can't see how it, with just a little bit of meringue powder, I think it would be an acceptable topping.
Great, thank you. Monica says she'll submit it to the tech lab.
Yeah, the last time I submitted a sample there, it was $15 for the pH.
Great. Rebecca has a question. She says, can you clarify no canned items except jam and jelly? Are there other items that are okay under cottage foods?
No, the chutneys have been coming back as a high risk, and even the butters, like the apple butters and stuff like that. I'd have to, with the testing, we can approve it as a cottage food since it's fruit-based. But off the top of my head, I haven't come across another product that really isn't considered an acidified food. And that approval comes from FDA too, as a identity standard for jams and jellies, for the reason we can consider them low risk.
And Rebecca says that what she's specifically looking at making are beer, champagne, and wine jellies. She said she's tested that they do have a pH under 4.6.
Okay, then with that, if she submits that test with the request to get in to sell a cottage food, we can approve that.
Okay, so just to be clear, she should send it to the tech lab and she needs an external verification of the pH.
Yes, that pH is below. I had someone send in wildflower jelly. Well, it was like rose petal jelly where they seeped all the rose petals and put that in the jelly, and that turned out to be low, below 4.6.
Okay. And Rebecca's asking, how do we get these official tests? Where is the tech lab?
The tech lab is in Caldwell, and if you just box it up and send it like express mail down there, they get the answers back. I think I had mine, I mailed it until I got it back. It was like within the same week. But
and that's at the
usually
University of Idaho. That's the University of Idaho?
Yes, the University of Idaho Tech Health Lab. I have the website at the end of the deal,
Great, so that website will be in the presentation that we send
yeah.
out to you.
Yes.
Okay, so those are all the questions that have come in so far, Nancy. And if you do have other questions that come in, we'll have another
Yeah,
Q&A session
we
in a
can
couple minutes.
hold them till the end too. We can go back and.
Yes.
So moving on to the regulated food, and it sounds like a good many of our viewers today will fall into this category where they want to take the food to the next level. You know, making a pickle, making a salsa, making, if you want to wholesale jams and jellies, chickens and all that. So all these foods, it's just a little chart to help you navigate the thing. All my barbecue sauces have been coming up as an acidified food. However, I think mustard has been actually testing out as a cottage food. So that's something to consider. I guess it just depends on how you make it.
Right.
But if you're going to help the whole, go ahead.
Oh, I noticed that on this slide that there's a number of other agencies, as you referred to in your opening, that may have requirements related to these different products in addition to going to Department of Health.
Yeah, if you're going to make beef jerky, as long as you're just retail selling it, that would fall under our jurisdiction. It's when you get the wholesaling, then USDA, FSIS would become involved. There's FDA who becomes involved if you want to wholesale across state lines, but as long as you're selling everything that you make in Idaho, then it would just be your local health department. So you can wholesale, say you want to make jams and jellies and sell wholesale to a gift shop, as long as all the gift shops are in Idaho, then it would just come under the local health department jurisdiction. And then when you go across state lines, they review the risk of the food and how much interstate commerce that you actually are producing before FDA would pick you up. Right now, the public health doesn't have the jurisdiction on, we used to have the contract to do FDA inspections for low risk foods. That has now under the jurisdiction of Idaho Department of Agriculture, which I think they were supposed to have something up and running by October 1st. So it gets kind of complicated because you would be regulated by the local health department. And then when you met the criteria to go under FDA inspection, and it was a low risk food, say like caramels, most likely there's a contract that it would be an Idaho Department of Agriculture employee doing your inspection in lieu of the health department. So we would have to submit your application to for referral to FDA.
Thank you for that clarification.
Yeah. We usually can help you through all that paperwork when you get big and you know, your business grows to the point where you need to be up the level.
I'm gonna double
I think
check.
I put my question slide in the wrong spot.
Well, no other questions have come in, so we will keep going.
There we go. So we get to the specifics in your licensing. A lot of people start out at the farmer's market, and if you are a low risk food, then you don't need to follow any rules, but you know, public health would certainly like you to follow the rules. We do have a temporary form that goes along with your application for that. And then so maybe you already own a restaurant and you want to expand, like say you have a great salad dressing or a barbecue sauce that you would like to get distributed into farmers market, you might need the temporary booth for that. And then And then it sounds like a lot of you want to be processors. So we're going to kind of review these individually. So a licensed temporary only can operate at like a fair or an event for 14 days consecutive. So we hardly have any fairs that go that long. So it's interesting that the longer the event goes, the harder it is to keep food safe whenever you're at a venue like that. The video that we're going to watch here in a little bit will says 30 days, but I'd be lucky if I can get on 2 days before your event. So don't worry about procrastinating a little bit, but at least in our office, we are pretty accommodating with late, but the rules kind of do say 14 days. So that's why we put it on there. Ideally, we would like a temporary food vendor to be like heat and eat, very, very minimal, you know, in that medium risk category, and not do a lot of cooking and cooling. But we don't limit the menu if you can show us that you can keep the food safe throughout the process. So if you have a commissary where you cook the food ahead of time and cool it, and then you reheat on site, or you reheat and bring it to market, or if you cook food and freeze it. So that would all be in need of a commissary, but we review on a case-by-case basis your menu items. But we would like them to be like heat and eat, like burgers, hot dogs, but in reality, a lot of the foods that people want these days are not minimal food prep. So don't let that be a deal killer for your ideas. So we usually, okay, that's fine. They added a temporary food exam to take the place of the certification for food safety manager, which is the big approved test that's required by rule. They did have a 25 question test just for the temporary people, because most of them are doing, you know, hot dogs and hamburgers or cheese steaks of that nature. You can just make an appointment to take that test whenever you come in to submit your application, or a lot of times if you're running around the state and haven't had a chance to take it, you can take the exam during the inspection. So it's not real complicated. We do have all that on the manual for that temporary test is on our website, and or you can call the office and we'll be happy to get you a copy of that. If you want to do some web searching, you can go to the Central District Health District site, and they actually have the exam on their webpage. So I wouldn't have any problem with you doing it that way either, and submit the test. So I can grade it here. And then, did you want to show that YouTube video now, or?
That might be a great idea. So while Mackenzie, if you could go ahead and take the screen to show that, perhaps while that's getting queued up, we have a couple of questions that have come in. And one question Lisa asks is, how many questions are on that test?
25.
Okay, 25. And then
they're pretty basic, you know.
Okay.
Why you need to wash your hands.
Great. And then Sunny's asking, what happens during an inspection? So
you probably we are going to focus on the risk factors. So cleanliness, food off the floor, all your temperatures. hot food hot, cold food cold, no cross-contamination. And the biggest thing that I find at our farmers market is that the hand washing station is not set up properly. So ideally you should have a insulated cooler with a spigot valve. The water needs to be 100 degrees or more with paper towels and soap. But a lot of times, that may be right. The water is usually cold whenever we do our inspection, or the hand washing station is set up facing outside the booth. So you have to completely go outside your booth area to wash your hands. So we want that to be towards the booth itself and not pointed like out to the street side.
And I think we'll see that in the video. So let's run the video and then maybe follow up with
video.
Great.
Welcome to an introduction of how to set up a temporary food booth, presented by the Idaho Department of Health and Welfare Food Protection Program. In this video, we'll go over some of the requirements and provide some tips on how to run a food booth safely. Using this video as a guide will allow you to pass your food safety inspection without any problems. In order to operate a temporary food booth, you must apply for a temporary food permit with your local public health district. For licensing timelines, the state rule requires submission of your application 30 days before your event. In order to obtain a permit, you must be operating in conjunction with a single event or celebration. For example, fairs, festivals, farmers markets, concerts, trade shows, and auctions. There's no exhaustive list, so speak with your public health district if you have questions. Your food booth should have weatherproof overhead coverage. If possible, there should be only one open side allowed for customer service. Be mindful of where you set your booth up to protect from pests, weather, and other environmental factors. For example, setting up your food booth on a dirt floor or next to horse stables should be avoided. In arranging your booth, try to create some space between the food preparation area and where customers pay for and receive their food. Your booth should consist of separate stations. Our first station is the hand washing station. At a minimum, you need to have a 5-gallon thermal container with a spigot that provides a continuous flow of warm water. A push-button spigot is not acceptable. You'll also need liquid hand soap, paper towels, and a 5-gallon bucket to collect wastewater. Remember, wastewater must be discarded in a sanitary manner. No dumping in streets or on the ground. Also, keep in mind that you may need to periodically change out or add hot water to maintain warm water in your container. Cold water for hand washing is not acceptable. Disposable gloves and/or clean utensils must be available in your booth to prevent bare hand contact of ready-to-eat foods. The next station is our dishwashing facilities. All utensils must be washed, rinsed, and sanitized in 3 compartments or tubs. The process includes washing dirty utensils in hot soapy water, rinsing in hot water, and then sanitizing in the final tub. Your utensils should soak in your sanitizing tub for at least 10 seconds before you remove them. Do not use a towel or any form of fabric to dry utensils. You should have a rack for air drying your sanitized utensils. For the sanitizing tub, it's recommended that you use regular unscented bleach. The goal is to achieve concentration of 50 to 100 parts per million. Test strips are required to determine your concentration. Here's an example of a test strip and where on the scale your solution needs to be. A separate bucket of sanitizer for rinsing and storing wiping cloths used to clean counters and other items is required. Solutions should be changed every 1 to 2 hours throughout the day. If you have pressurized water supplied to your booth, fixtures must be protected from cross connections to prevent pollutants or contaminants entering the safe drinking water system. In addition, a drinking water hose like this one is required. The hose must be clearly marked for drinking water use. The next station is cold holding. Mechanical refrigeration is recommended. However, a cooler filled with ice from an approved source, like a grocery store, is most common. Whichever cold holding unit you decide to use in your booth, it must maintain food at a temperature of 41 degrees Fahrenheit or less, and your cold holding unit must be supplied with an ambient air thermometer. If you have raw meat and ready-to-eat foods, they need to be stored in such a way to prevent cross-contamination. This cooler has a basket that allows for the storage of ready-to-eat foods above the raw meat. It's recommended to have separate coolers if you don't have enough space to safely separate items. The next station is the hot holding or cooking equipment station. You must have adequate cooking equipment that can heat food to a minimum cook temperature as required in the Idaho Food Code. Crock pots and steam tables should not be used for cooking or reheating foods, only for hot holding. If you are hot holding food, your equipment must be able to maintain food at or above 135 degrees Fahrenheit and have a cover. If you're transporting hot food from a commissary, it must be in a durable, insulated container that can maintain a temperature of 135 degrees Fahrenheit. A metal stem thermometer must be available in the booth to measure food temperatures. Our final station is garbage disposal. You must have a trash container with a tight-fitting lid for your garbage. As we come to the end of our video, we have a few reminders. Number 1. You must have your food booth completely set up before any food prep begins on site. Number 2, booth floors may be set up on concrete, asphalt, or dirt or gravel if it's covered with mats, removable platforms, duct boards, or other approved materials that are effectively treated to control dust and mud. Number 3, no food can be prepared or stored off-site unless approved by the local public health district through a commissary agreement. Number 4, food and water must come from an approved source. If you buy all of your product from a grocery store, you won't have anything to worry about. Number 5, bleach, detergents, other chemicals, and cleaning supplies must be stored in a separate area away from food prep. Number 6, if you are operating at night, you must have adequate lighting over your food prep areas. Number 7, eating, drinking, or using tobacco is not allowed in food preparation areas and should be done only in designated locations. And number 8, bare hand contact with ready-to-eat food is not allowed. Suitable utensils such as deli tissues, spatulas, tongs, or single-use gloves must be used. Thank you for watching this video. We wish you the best with your temporary food establishment. For additional information, visit the website below.
Great, thanks for showing that video, Mackenzie. So
any questions on that?
Let me.
I couldn't have, it'd take me 2 hours to say exactly the same thing he says. So I thought it was a really great presentation the state made up.
Yes, absolutely. So a couple questions, and they might not directly relate to the video, that have come in. One is, if I have a bed and breakfast and want to share homestead food, does that require a licensure?
So bed and breakfast, and they want to do what?
They want to share the homestead food. So I'm guessing that means that that is food that is prepared on site.
Yeah, it's supposed to be limited to breakfast. Breakfast item, but or that one meal.
Okay, great.
But the whole thing about the bed and breakfast is exempted with the 18 bugs so that you could, have that experience of cooking on the farm. So I think she would fall under that bed and breakfast exemption.
Okay, great.
You just can't serve supper.
Okay.
So she'd have to serve the food for breakfast.
Okay, so to be exempt, you need to be under that bed and breakfast exemption and have the food that you're serving be breakfast food. If you want to serve other meals, then you would fall under a different set of rules.
You would be regulated.
Okay, great. Thank you. And then Rebecca asks, is the food license for packaged things too, or just serving ready to eat stuff?
I think I missed the key, the food.
She's wondering if you need, I believe she's asking if the cottage food covers just packaged foods or ready to eat foods as well. And Rebecca, please type into the chat or unmute if I'm not asking your question correctly.
Well, the cottage food, so if she wanted to like just sell cookie dough, the cookie dough would not fall under the cottage food rule, but the actual cookie would fall under the cottage food rule. So it's all based on risk, whatever she wants to do for under the cottage food. So
Okay.
it, like a pancake mix is not a cooked product, so that would fall under cottage food, if that makes sense.
Yes. So Rebecca, if you have any clarifying questions regarding that explanation, go ahead and type them in the chat and we'll answer those at our next Q&A. So let's see.
Okay, next slide, I think we're.
Okay.
All right, moving on to the restaurants, and I don't know if you want to review like the fees or that nature, or how many people have a restaurant or want to start a restaurant. A lot of times people start in farmers market and then they move into a storefront. So we're going to briefly review the restaurants. The physical facilities of a restaurant is really important. So we start out with a plan review to make sure the flow of your food from start to finish is going to not cause you headaches down the road. The plan review, they are in 2015, the state allows the individual health districts to charge a fee for that. And it's $100 here in District 2. And I believe the other districts do have a little bit different fee for that. But whenever you submit your plan, we'll need a menu, because all food plan reviews and physical facilities is generated off that menu. So depending on what you want to make will depend on what that physical facilities will look like. And the equipment list is important too, because if you recall in the video we just saw about, a lot of people like to use crock pots, but again, you can't cook in the crock pot. You can hold stuff in the crock pot, but it's not made to actually doing that task of cooking. So we keep that in mind, and when we review like the floor plan and your whole total concept of your restaurant. So we'll issue a license after we do a pre-opening inspection to make sure all your floors, walls, and ceilings are smooth and cleanable. All your hand paper towels are up, the soap is up, all your cold holding equipment is holding temperature at 41 degrees or less. And so the biggest kicker with the restaurant, whenever the new rules came into effect, was that accreditation as a food protection manager. And there only needs to be one person accredited, and they don't have to be on site, but they need to be available. So by phone or whatever, it's like, hey, my cooler's broken, what do you want me to do with all this food? There are 6 companies approved at this point in time that are FDA approved as for the accreditation. 2 of those I'm aware of is all online. It sounds like ServSafe is online too. We do have Stephanie Smith, the WSU extension, is now giving in-person classes, and they greatly reduce the price of that ServSafe class. So sometimes they're late notice where there's like a 30-day notice, and we try to put that up on our website when those classes are available. There's, you can also, learn all the information on your own, and WSU and Walla Walla Community College have a testing center where you just go make an appointment and take the test. And I believe the last that we went, it was $45 to do it that way, where you train yourself. The test is based off the 2013 FDA Model Food Code, and which is luckily for us, the Idaho rule book is 2013 food code. So one and the same, just we changed the cover on it. Next page. I think I duplicated that slide. The only thing that this one added on there was the person in charge. So if the person in charge on site when the inspector arrives for the inspection doesn't have the CFPM credentials, then that owner or the manager needs to leave somebody in charge that knows about food safety. We call that a person in charge, and they can take the Idaho food handlers test to pass the demonstration of knowledge, and then, or we have a couple questions that we ask them about food safety. You can pass that way, but the best way I love to pass demonstration of knowledge is no violations. And that would be critical violations. I mean, if the floor is dirty, they would probably still pass, but having no critical violations is the best way to show the inspector you know what you're doing. Next slide. So this is kind of getting into some processors. It sounds like we do have some people wanting to do these things. Making a beverage is a little bit easier than, bringing a food or a high-risk food to market. Most of these wine and kombucha are fermented foods, so you still need a HACCP plan. And like kombucha needs to be regulated. And then after the kombucha is made and stored, then it has to be maintained at 41 degrees or less or to continue to turn to alcohol. So, but after that point, you make it under regulation, and then, say a commissary, and then when you can take it to market and not have to have a temporary permit. So sometimes when we do the food rules, you have to have a permit for your restaurant, and then you have to have a permit to come to market. So it kind of depends on how it shakes out with your product that you want to bring to market. So the source, just make sure that, like with kombucha, you have to buy the SCOBY. Just make sure that whoever you're buying that from, they should be regulated when they make their SCOBY. I think typically after they get your kombucha up and running, that you can reuse your own SCOBY, or I think that's how they pronounce that. So.
Yes, that is how it's pronounced.
Yeah. So that's just the interstate commerce again, where FDA would be regulating some of your ingredients as you bring them over. If you want to make food out of your own fruit, that is totally fine. That would not be regulated. So if you have a garden and you want to make jelly, then you can do that. Next slide. So there's all kinds of different regulations for different products. So juice, I haven't, like a lot of these, I haven't ever had a juice that, like say you have a fruit juice that you want to can, where you have to meet that reduction in the logs of bacteria, like an apple cider or an apple juice. I've never had anybody that did that. Seafood, we don't have people do that around here, but we do have people make, wanting to make sauerkraut and pickles. But I haven't ever had anybody take the risk in canning vegetables yet. So if you do want to do the low acid canned foods and the acidified foods, you have to take a special class. It's called Better Processing School. WSU holds it once a year, and it's usually over in the Tacoma area. There is Utah State has that Better Processing School online, I think now. A lot of people were taken at the University of Tennessee. And some of them are just for the acidified foods class, where you want to make, pickles, but you have to take the whole class for the low acid canned food. So if you're already taking it, you might as well just sit through the whole class, because I think it's the same price, whether you just take the acidified food. Usually it's 2 days acidified food and 2 days of low acid canned food. And I actually need to take that class. I've been procrastinating for 20 years. I don't know if I can put it off a couple more, but I do have some people that make barbecue and hot sauce here in town that took it, and I have my jam and jelly lady took the class. So it's the ones online are self-paced, so which makes it nice if you can learn that way. I prefer probably to take it in person. And if you need help trying to find a class, then you can just contact my office and I can help you find one. The USDA, like if you want to do beef jerky, again, if it's just sold retail out of your store, then it would fall under our jurisdiction. But if you want to bring that to wholesale, you're going to have the seal, the US, the bug on your product. So if you have a herd of cows and you want to, sell hamburger, wholesale to the local grocery stores, that falls under USDA. And then typically you have it butchered, say at U of I or Woods Processing. You bring it back, you put it in your freezers, and then the local health department regulates your freezers. And then we inspect to make sure your coolers that you're using don't have blood all over them. And that if there's some package leaking, or make sure that your frozen food stays frozen. So kind of come under two agencies that way. The acidified food and the other products that would come under FDA jurisdiction. But we walk you all through that when you come in to present your ideas. Next slide. So meat processing, I've worked with some chicken processors with getting a facility up and running to sell chickens. There's a little bit, and we'd like to have two sides on that processing floor, one for the kill floor, one for the processing floor. that there's some special labeling that goes with chicken, but it's like if all the chickens are sold in the state of Idaho, it comes under our jurisdiction. If you start selling across state lines, then that goes back to USDA is regulating that interstate commerce for poultry. So I can't have chickens from Washington state come over to Idaho. Idaho chickens can't go over to Washington. But if they pick them up at your house, that would be fine. The rules don't, if you're just selling off the farm, then we are not involved if you want to sell direct to the consumer. Because that falls under that exemption. Our rules would apply if you wanted to kill chickens and take them to the farmer's market or sell them into a restaurant for, you know, a local source. Same with rabbits. I thought a couple years ago they weren't having the vet do the pre and post-mortem inspections on that. I got to talk. The last word I had is that needed to be done, and part of your processing plan is to have that pre and post-mortem inspection by a vet. But I thought, and no, it never was written down. So right now we're working with that same protocols that have that statement in there. So right now we're going with, it needs to have pre and post-mortem wellness check, I guess you might call it.
Okay, so anybody have questions? Let's see, we have a couple of questions that have come in. So let's see. So the Safe Serve class is online, and that is an option for everyone. And Stephanie Smith at Washington State University would be the contact. And I can help you get in touch with her if you would like to reach her or to find out information about the classes that are offered through Washington State University. I can help you get on the notification list for those classes. So we have a question. Are state regulations the same on rabbits for human consumption versus raw pet food?
Oh, the pet food goes through the Idaho Department of Agriculture and not for us. And we had an incident years ago where just with a dog biscuit, they were going to charge her $100 per sale fee for the violation that to sell animal food. So it's actually, from my experience, it's harder to get it into pet food than human food. And this just had cornmeal and peanut butter in it. So you might, I don't have a contact at Idaho Department of Agriculture that would review that. I think the permit for that is only $35, but I know they wanted you to do nutritional analysis on the food. But I know that the legislature's gotten involved with that. So maybe for local stuff, they have changed maybe how they think about getting pet food to market, but they call about anything pet food if you're going to put that label on the item. So Colette, I'll try to find somebody down, and then I can get that to your viewers.
Okay,
that would contact for animal food.
Okay, that would be great. Thank
you.
Whether
it's a dog biscuit or bones, or because a lot of it, we have waste bones that want to be, if you kill a cow and you want to sell a bone for a bone to a dog, how that all happens. But
okay, that would be great, Nancy.
So I'll make that an action item.
Great. We have a couple of questions that have come in around poultry, so both chickens and turkeys. So chickens need to be butchered in a USDA inspected or certified facility if it's over 20,000 birds a year. If it's under 20,000 birds a year, they can be sold direct after being processed on the farm. Is that correct?
Yeah, to the end user. So if I wanted to buy 50 chickens from her, then she could sell them to me.
Direct from the
And
farm.
the 20,000 chickens has to do with you have to do like a confined animal feeding plan. So it's really not part of my rules, the 20,000. It's the Department of Ag will make you have, what are you going to do with all your chicken manure, and confined feeding operations plans for the number. I think that's where that number came from.
Okay, that's really helpful. And then if chickens are being processed on the farm and the grower would like to sell them at farmer's market or direct to a restaurant, or if they can sell them to a retail establishment, that would need to be inspected.
Yeah, it comes through me. Yeah.
Okay, great.
And we did have the chicken waste from the kill floor. I know that somebody a long time ago was going to talk to the legislature to see if we could kill outside. But nothing, I think it fell flat on its face. But so for now, that kill floor would have to be inside.
Okay, great. So Rebecca is asking if there were butchering requirements for on-farm if under 20,000, and if they are.
No, you can kill outside if you're just selling me 50 chickens.
Is that the same if they're selling direct to a
retailer? Selling direct to the end user. Once you go and sell this would be like someone would have to order your chickens. Or like Thanksgiving, you're going to take orders all summer long for Thanksgiving turkeys. They can be killed out on the farm because that's a direct farm to table type of situation. But if you want to kill the turkey and take it to market and just sell it to whoever's walking by, then that's regulated.
And with that regulation, you would come out and do an inspection.
Yeah, we have to do the full plan review. 3 compartment sink, hand sink, mop sink, smooth cleanable floors, walls, and ceiling. And probably a freezer.
Great.
And they could do, and they don't have to sell them whole either. At that, once you're ready, you could sell them at, cut up into parts. So a lot of people would want to vacuum pack them too. I'd need a plan for the vacuum packing because most, so they wouldn't get freezer burnt or whatever. You'd probably want to make them pretty by being in the vacuum packing, packaging and label. Of course, we'd have to approve your label. But you'd need your HACCP plan for reduced oxygen packaging. But it's easy on raw food, so don't cook it. It's complicated. Okay. You start cooking the chicken.
Great.
If you wanted to smoke it and then vacuum pack it, a little bit more complicated.
Yes, and you can raise.
It can be done.
You can raise turkeys and sell them direct off your farm. The number that you can raise is different than that of other poultry. I believe it's 5,000 or less. Is that correct, Nancy, for turkeys?
I am not aware of that. I thought it was all poultry. It wouldn't matter what it was, but I can look into that. I've never heard a max number on a different type of bird.
I believe there is a different number and that it is in the Idaho Food Code. I am definitely going to send a link to the Idaho Food Code out in a follow-up email.
Because we don't call out specific. I was unaware that we would call out specifically a turkey from other poultry.
I think it's just the number of birds for the exemption, but I will double check that.
Okay.
So Jennifer's just clarifying, selling at farmer's market requires coming through your agency. And if she doesn't want to go through all those hoops, she can take the chickens to a USDA butcher and then have her freezers inspected by your agency.
Yes.
Yes. Okay, great. And then Becky is asking about requirements for labeling products. And Becky, that's actually the entire focus of next week's webinar. So I think we could hold that question for next week.
Yeah, on the HACCP plan that Colette's going to email everybody, I do have some examples out there of labeling, and it's mostly for reduced section and packaging. Labeling is just an idea to kind of call out the different things that are required on a label. You know, they're obviously different for a cupcake than they would be for, you know, raw chicken. So, but it says it kind of pulls out the basic requirements, and then the more items that you do, the more information you would have to put on there. But the biggest thing is now it says including the allergen denotation on there. And they'll probably cover that in more depth next week. So we don't probably need to get down in the weeds on that today.
Absolutely.
This is Lisa. I have a question. One thing I learned here, and I don't know if you're going to mention it or if you did mention it, I missed it. But one thing I learned that I had to do when I started my business is I actually had to register my business name with the state of Idaho. And that cost me $25 before I actually started anything. Because when I signed up for the cottage food law, they checked to make sure my name was registered with the state. And also when I set up a banking account, just for a business banking account, they made sure I was registered with the state of Idaho, my business name.
I've never heard of anybody having to do that before.
They told me I could be shut down if I didn't register my business name.
That must be through business licensing.
No, well, business licensing was different because I went to get a seller's permit from somewhere different. It was actually
in District 2 or somewhere else.
No, it was a separate department altogether to get my name registered. It was with the state of Idaho.
I think Nancy's question is where you're located.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm in Eagle, Idaho.
Okay.
Oh, well, they probably have some kind of city rules down there.
Oh.
That's the thing that's super
I am unaware of anybody having to register. I mean, registering your company because you're doing an acidified food would be one thing, but it sounds like it's something local.
You know, I don't know. When I was Googling everything.
It doesn't, I don't think it's under my purview of knowing the answer to that question.
Okay, I was just putting it out there because I didn't know. It was actually with the the state of Idaho, the Secretary of State. I had to register my business name.
Yeah, and I think that that's one of the really tricky things when you're working with developing a food business is that there are so many jurisdictions, and sometimes the rules are really coming from an agency that is other than the health department. And it takes a little bit of digging to figure out exactly where that jurisdiction lies. So as Nancy said, that might not be a health department rule. It might be another agency, or it might be at the city level. And that's why oftentimes when people are selling at farmers markets, they might run into different rules, and those rules might be not a health department rule, but they might be a city rule, or they might be a farmers market rule. So it takes digging into those different, like doing a little bit of digging to find the source of the rule.
Yeah, because I just pulled up a checklist for your business, and it came up on that I had to register with the Secretary of State.
Right. And so there are rules for businesses establishing a business in Idaho, and how you pay taxes, how you register. And again, that's another jurisdiction that would be outside of what Nancy would look
Okay.
at, or your health department.
Yeah, okay.
That's a great thing to bring up, because it is important to check with the state of Idaho and look at the rules for establishing a business. And I think we can spend some more time talking about that maybe in later in this class or in another week.
Excellent. I know when we have our farmers market meeting here in Moscow in the spring, the tax lady comes in and, she lines everybody out on that. And we have the weight and measures guy come and he certifies all the scales. And we have a couple other agencies that speak at that meeting. So we try to cover all the bases on that. But good to know. So moving on, this usually is a big elephant in a room whenever you want to kind of take your food to the next level, or if you want to do something crazy with the food that you do want to prepare. A HACCP plan in the food rules, it covers all this specialty foods, and not which specialty in the food code is a little bit different than ours, bringing a specialty food to market. So if you reduce, auction, and packaging anything, you're required to have a HACCP plan. If you're going to acidify anything, if you're going to ferment anything, if you want to do anything crazy like keep your boiling water after you cook a bunch of vegetables and reuse that, you might need a HACCP plan for that. So I just wanted to go through the basic steps for creating a HACCP plan. And so there's 7 steps. And so the first one would be to perform a hazard analysis. So basically, it's just a step identifying kind of how the food flows through your facility. Like if you're going to take a pickle, you're going to buy cucumbers from somebody, or you're going to grow them yourself. And then, so you want to know the source, and then you'll need some vinegar and some salt. And you'll have to like slice them, dice them, cook them, whatever your recipe is. And then you'll want to package it and can it. And so basically you're going to look at your process and you're going to identify the hazards. So the next step is determining which one of those steps or how many of those steps are actually critical control points. So if something goes wrong at some level in your process, is that going to make somebody sick? So we don't call everything a critical control point. So, washing a vegetable with your bare hands that you're going to cook later, that wouldn't be a critical control step. The cooking part would be your control step. The cooling would be a control step. So if you didn't, cook right, that might be an issue. If you don't cool right, that could cause bacteria to grow. Or if you don't acidify your food properly, to get it below 4.6 in 24 hours, that might be an issue. So you'll pull those critical control points out. So you might have 3 or 4 in your process. And so the next step is to come up and set limits for that, to control that item that you identified as maybe be an issue. And then, so after you identify, you kind of write what you're going to do to monitor it. And then you're going to figure out like who, what, where, when is the monitoring going to happen and who's in charge. So then if something goes wrong, so say you want to cook your salsa to 182 for 2 minutes, and that didn't happen. So are you going to recook the salsa for 2 more minutes to make it happen? Or you want to throw it away? Are you going to, you know, just exactly how you're going to address it if that critical control point wasn't met in your system. And then the corrective action, you want to note the correction action that you would take. So then the next step is to verify that all your steps were met. You know, by the overall process, you might have like a something for that final product check. Let's say that you're doing pickles and you do that equilibrium pH test after 24 hours to make sure those center pickles ended up getting to be 4.6, the same as the outside pickle. Or because sometimes, like if you use a little jar of pickles or a bigger jar of pickles, it might, you know, your processing might be different. But you'll want to verify that everything is how it's supposed to be. And then record keeping, you would need like a recall plan and, you know, where you're a coding system, like a lot, like is considered 6 hours, 1 to 6 hours. So you'd want to have, and coding, you need to make it real simple, or you can make it complicated, however you want to do it. You just have it written out what your coding system is. So if you ever needed to do a recall, you could get your food back that may have been in question. Next slide. So a lot of people wonder why they want to have a HACCP plan and why is it important. You know, it's a lot of paperwork, but it just really makes you think about your operations. When we put it prioritizes the food safety risk with your product. Control. The biggest thing is it helps you identify and control the hazard that your food might have. So if you're going to have pHs be in your control to make sure it meets the 4.6 or less, like for wholesaling jams and jellies, you probably want to make sure the water activity is at the proper level, or if you're freezing chickens, you want to make sure that you get them frozen in an X amount of time for quality or condition. So a lot of times, like I had a girl that was making biscotti years ago, and she moved to Oregon because she outgrew her little garage that she had here in town, and she needed to have a HACCP plan to actually sell her product into some bigger stores. So you might need one anyway. And under the Code of Federal Regulations, good manufacturing practices, it's a condition too. The FDA also requires a HACCP plan. So you're going to need it eventually, because the whole end game would be to grow your company and become bigger. I put the Idaho Tech Helpline. They actually have throughout the year HACCP training classes. They have labeling classes. They have all kinds of small business, bring your ideas to life training and help. Some cost money, some don't. But an excellent resource to use those people at that incubator to help bring your product to life. Next slide. So I guess we're just about in closing. it is your responsibility to know the rules, and there's so many different, Colette and myself and people at the U of I Extension are all, full of information that we just like to spew out on people. So don't hesitate to call any of us. and kind of know food safety and, you know, how to properly get all the bugs out of your food. I did put the Idaho food safety exam and manual is available on the health and welfare site. We have a link to that. So if you go on to the local health department site, it usually will divert you and link you to the test. And that's a 50-question test on that one. And then that demonstration of knowledge, we want to, that's kind of a key component because we figure the more you know about food safety, the better the inspection will go and food safety will not be an issue. So we definitely don't like taking a regulatory action if we don't have to. And the 4 ways to demonstrate, I briefly mentioned them before, would be you can either have your ServSafe certification as a food protection manager. You can answer questions on page 21 about all kinds of stuff. You can have no violations, or you can have that Idaho food handlers certification.
So this is a question that came in that might be best asked now, Nancy. Lisa's asking, is this Idaho food safety exam a test you have to take before you are able to become a wholesaler?
Well, if you're a wholesaler, we would make you take the certification as a food protection manager. So technically you would not need to take that other exam. You would have, but you do have to take the CFPM one. You wouldn't have to take both.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Does that make sense?
And then Lisa's asking, where would she find information about that test?
I have a cut sheet, and the health and welfare site has a cut sheet too on both our websites, but I can send you a copy of that to send out.
Okay, that would be great.
But it is available. It's just a cut, the cut sheet that gives you the 6 different avenues to do. Usually we just pull up the website and type in certification of food protection manager, and it would usually pops up if you wanted to do an online version. Otherwise, we'll have to. Stephanie's the only one teaching a local class right now. I would imagine, so the rule went in about in 19, 20, because we soft coded it for 2 years, 18, 19, 20, 22, 23. So probably next year, we'll probably have someone come in and start, because we have all the people, we have like 800 restaurants in District 2, will have to be recertified because their 5 years will be up. So we'll probably be doing some more, gearing up to do more in-person classes next year.
Okay, great.
Because everybody's certificate is going to expire.
Thank you. And then is it Stephanie Smith at Washington State University who is?
Yes. But she's teaching the in-person class right now.
Okay, great. Thank you. And Mackenzie has just put a web page in the chat that you could save that URL or click on it. That is going to provide some more information about food safety and required trainings. We'll also make sure to include that link in our follow-up email with the handouts that Nancy has provided. Okay, next slide.
Yeah. So just be very familiar with the regulations and the agency that you need to work with, but the local, like your local health inspector would be able to help you as your company grows to what you would actually need and where your next step. So once FDA, like on some of the foods, FDA, after you're picked up by them, the local health department doesn't have jurisdiction over your food anymore. I don't know how many people would know that. Then USDA, same thing. Whenever they pick you up, then we have a statute that says if you're regulated by another food agency, federal agency, that you wouldn't be double dinged with inspections. And like in Washington, they get inspected 4 times by the local department and once by FDA. So they get inspected like all year long. Yeah, just try to have a good attitude of what, the rules and regulations are there for. It's basically to protect the public. And then just remember, I'm a customer too, so. I like to eat. Yeah. So this is just a couple of resources. But I want to just have you know that your local health department would be your first line of defense whenever you want to bring a food to the market. So not market meaning farmers market, but just in general, regardless of what you want to do. There's lots of knowledgeable people in this whole state that so contact your local person. Sometimes like here in District 2 where I'm at, we have 4 new staff people, so they usually are calling me in to help people out with stuff they don't understand yet, and because they all were just hired since February. So we're a little behind the 8 ball and actually getting them trained up and going. And I don't want to I'll throw Jared Samples as the state food program coordinator. He would be a resource too, but he should have come through the local health department and then through him. So, but if you need to visit with him, he basically interprets rules for us so that the whole state is applying the rules the same to everybody in the whole state. So he's our consistency guy. The website for FDA has a ton of information on juice. If you are interested in processing apple juice or some other fruit juice, they have all the rules for Bismuth on there. There's some videos that they have on there, just a magnitude, a wealth of information. And then I did want to put up, most of the people that come through here are under current good manufacturing practices with the CFR 117, but I did have a water plant that opened up, and the CFR for that is they have 2 CFRs for bottled water. But most of everything that we deal with will come under 117. Acidified foods is 113 and 114. Low acid foods are 113 and acid foods are 114. So, and then the Idaho Food Code addresses, refers back to 113 and 114. So that's why we needed to have that better processing school for those products.
All right, thank you, Nancy. I'm going to check and see if there's a few more questions that have come in. We do have a question from Rebecca. She says if she's at market selling jellies, but has a sign advertising her on-farm meat that is for sale, is that any type of violation in terms of the health districts?
No, you can put up a sign that she has meat for sale there at market, and then she would either deliver it or the person would come to the farm to get it. That would not be a problem.
Okay,
If she's bringing the meat to market and has a cooler there, then she needs a permit.
okay, great, thank you. So I think that's all of the questions.
Yeah,
that
I do
have-
encourage, people that want to sell their meat, because of the regulations to bring a meat to market is pretty substantial. So to hopefully taking orders while you're selling your jams and jellies is a good avenue to get your name out there. And then hopefully you have enough repeat customers coming back that you don't have to go to that added expense of having it regulated.
Great. So we are going to talk about one more rule that applies to anyone who is looking to develop a food for human consumption. So I am going to move back into sharing my screen. And so I can talk about that rule. I'm sorry. It's taking me a second to manage all of the controls. So that showed Nancy's presentation again. Is that correct?
Nope, it is the right presentation. It's the beginning of what you showed earlier.
Okay, so again, sorry for the crazy technology today. Okay, I'm going to talk about the Food Safety Modernization Act, which is referred to as FSMA, and in particular, Preventative Controls for Human Food. And what I'm talking about in terms of FSMA is in addition to everything that Nancy said. So complying with FSMA is something that you will need to do. You will also need to comply with all of the different rules and regs around food safety that Nancy talked about. So the Food Safety Modernization Act was really designed to prevent food safety hazards across the entire food system. It has 7 rules. When you are developing a processed specialty food, the Preventative Controls for Human Food rule is the one that will apply to you. If you are wanting to develop and sell animal food, there is a rule under FSMA that would also apply to you, and that is the Preventative Controls for Animal Food. You will get a copy of Nancy's slides and my slides. And as you can see at the bottom, I am providing the direct link to the FDA website that talks about FSMA. So FSMA is a rule that has come through the FDA, and in Idaho, the Idaho State Department of Agriculture is commissioned to essentially implement the rule and the regulations around the rule in Idaho. So preventative controls in human food, does or will it apply to you? It does apply if you manufacture, process, pack, or hold food for human consumption in the United States. And compliance has already started on this rule. It was signed into law in 2011. And you can see on this slide different compliance dates. As a very small business, which I believe all of you would fall under, that would be an average of less than $1 million per year in annual sales, and that is adjusted for inflation. That rule went into effect on September 18th, 2018. And when the number of less than 1 million is calculated, it includes the market value of all the food that is being manufactured, processed, packed, or held without sale. And as I said, it is adjusted yearly for inflation. So my experience is that when you're starting a specialty foods business, you definitely are a very small business in terms of the preventative controls for human food. There are exemptions within this rule, and if you have an exemption, you have modified requirements to comply with the rule. So as a business that is a very small business, you'd be considered a qualified facility, which means that you would qualify for modified requirements. And that means that if you sell less than $1 million and half of the value of the food you produce is sold direct to a qualified end user, then you will be under these modified requirements. So a qualified end user is a direct sale to a customer, a consumer, also a local retailer, restaurant, or on an Indian reservation within your state or within 275 miles. So essentially all of you will be considered a qualified facility under the Preventative Controls for Human Food rule. So what do you need to do? The exemption requirements are that you notify FDA about what you're doing. So you need to let them know that you're operating a food processing business, what you're developing, and sign an attestation that says that you are addressing the hazards through preventative controls and monitoring the preventative controls. So essentially you've developed a HACCP plan and you're following that HACCP plan, or you're complying with applicable non-federal food safety regulations and you're notifying consumers of the name and complete business address of the facility where you're making the food that you're selling. So if you're making that at home, that would be your home address. If you're using a commissary, that would be the address of the commissary. So again, as you can see, you're either doing a full HACCP plan and implementing that, or you're complying with the rules and regulations that Nancy just described. And you must notify the FDA and register your facility, which is a very simple process. And it's a checkbox of what you're doing. But if you don't notify the FDA and you're running a specialty foods business and developing specialty food products, you will be subject to the entire Preventative Controls for Human Foods rule. So essentially, you have to opt out of needing to meet all of the provisions of the rule. So you definitely want to register your facility and let them know how you are complying with the food safety rules. You also you have to follow the good management practices. And so in any type of rule, when you have an exemption, that doesn't exempt you from implementing food safety practices and being liable if somebody does get sick. And under the Food Safety Modernization Act, if it's found that you're not following best practices, you could lose your exemption. And again, if there is some type of food safety outbreak that is associated with products that you've produced, this exemption will not protect you in terms of liability to that customer. So we also recommend that you definitely have liability insurance for your company that covers the types of food you're producing, and that there's full disclosure with your insurance company about how you're selling those foods. So again, this is a FDA rule that you need to follow, in addition to the state rules that were identified by Nancy, and you also need to be using these good manufacturing processes. So to help you navigate this, we have a number of recorded webinars, and these webinars were the teachers in the webinars are our food safety specialists, including Stephanie Smith at Washington State University, Dr. Jang Ho Kim, who is at University of Idaho, and Josh Bevins, who has been at University of Idaho as well. So I'm providing the link to these value-added food production webinars, and I'm suggesting that when you watch them, that you watch them in this order. Starting out right, food safety for safe and wholesome foods is really going to cover all different kinds of food contamination. So it's going to cover chemical contamination, biological contamination, and physical contamination, and really help you be able to look at your operation with new eyes in terms of developing an assessment of food safety in your facility, whether that's your home or a rented facility or an external facility that you own. There's a much deeper webinar that's an introduction to preventative controls for human food. And actually there's a second webinar that's specifically introduction to preventative controls for human food if you are a farmer. Because if you are a farmer, there are some other exemption provisions that might apply to you under preventative controls. And then we have another webinar that's about what are good manufacturing practices. And that would be really great to watch before you go into making a food safety plan. And we do recommend that you go through all of these steps so that you are really looking at your operation through the lens of food safety. And while you may not decide to develop a full HACCP plan, that you have a food safety plan and you're really clear that your procedures that you're doing are protecting human health in terms of food safety. We also get questions about COVID-19 and what are some of the best practices for operating a business during this pandemic. If you go to the cultivatingsuccess.org website, we have an entire webpage that is up to date with COVID-19 resources and links. And so they vary from many different situations. And if you're not finding a specific resource that you would like to utilize or investigate on that page, please contact me. I'd be happy to help you. In particular, if you are selling at farmers markets and farm stands during the pandemic, we suggest that you watch this recorded webinar that's best practices for farmers markets and farm stands. And again, these are all available for free through our Cultivating Success website that's hosted by University of Idaho Extension. I'm going to go ahead and pause. I see that a couple of questions have come up in the chat. And let's look at those.
I think that was just me putting in some links.
Oh, great. So at this point, does anybody have any questions about FSMA and the Preventative Controls for Human Food rule, or where you'd find information, or any additional questions for Nancy about Idaho state rules? Okay, it looks like we don't have any more questions that have come in. Nancy, I really want to thank you for presenting today. This information has been great. We did record this webinar, so it will be available to those that are taking this webinar series but weren't able to make it here today. And next week, we are going to be talking about labeling and ingredient analysis. So we hope you can join us then. In the meantime, we will send out a link to this webinar recording, to the handouts that Nancy has provided about acidified foods and HACCP plans. And then additionally, the links that we have identified, contact information for Stephanie Smith, links to the Idaho Food Code, and we'll get some clarity about the number of turkeys that you can process on farm. If other questions come up, again, please do not hesitate to contact us. And finally, we really appreciate your feedback. If you could take a second to complete our post-webinar survey, Mackenzie's putting that in the chat. If you could take a couple seconds right now to do that, that would be great. You could also just scan this link with your smartphone and go right from this QR code to that evaluation. And we do appreciate your feedback. This is the first time we have offered this class in the virtual environment, and we really want to make sure that as we continue to develop this class, it is meeting the needs of our specialty foods business providers throughout the state. With that, I really want to thank you again, Nancy, for being here. Thanks to all the class members who are here today, and we look forward to seeing you next week.
You're welcome. I was glad I could help and participate.
Great. Thank you so much. And thanks to everyone. Have a really great day.